Although comic book movies are usually seen as guaranteed box office hits, especially these days, many graphic novel adaptations still consistently flop. Second-tier comics struggle the most. Since they don't have the $200 million budgets or large fan bases behind them, it's much harder for them to break through. Despite this, studios keep pouring money into them because comic book movies still seem to have a better chance of success than regular action or sci-fi movies with no established source material. So today, let's talk about a few comic book adaptations that failed to win over audiences and had a poor, or even disastrous, run at the box office. The story behind the creation of Spawn is kind of a Cinderella tale that went terribly wrong. In the mid-1990s, when New Line Cinema gave the green light to develop Spawn, the creators started approaching many famous Hollywood actors. Even director Tim Burton showed interest in the project. Once Burton's name came up, Danny DeVito started courting the filmmakers as well. The film's budget was expected to be quite substantial for that time. At one point, Will Smith was even considering the project. The actor liked the script, but ultimately chose Men in Black instead. According to Smith, he was worried that playing such a character might hurt his image as a down-to-earth fun guy. Once Smith backed out, Burton vanished as well, and DeVito quickly followed. After that, the studio significantly cut the film's budget, and the creators tried to approach smaller actors like Denzel Washington and even Snoop Dogg. However, due to various budget-related issues, they couldn't reach agreements with them either. The only actor who didn't turn down the role was Wesley Snipes. At the time, his career was already stalling, but he was still considered a major star. Snipes wanted to land a franchise, and although comic book adaptations didn't guarantee success back then, that didn't faze him. Spawn was supposed to be a small, dark film with a budget of $20 to $25 million. The production was already underway when Snipes got the opportunity to star in Blade. According to producer Todd McFarlane, it was all about the money. From the beginning, Blade's budget was set at $40 to $45 million, while Spawn could only count on a maximum of $25 million. In retrospect, it's possible that Wesley Snipes' time as a big star could have ended even sooner. After he dropped out of the project, the lead role went to Michael J. White, who wasn't a major star but was still a recognizable actor. Japanese director Mark DePay was hired to direct. With a budget of $25 million, the film went into production. The first footage sent to the studio left everyone impressed. New Line Cinema was so pleased with what they saw that they allocated an additional $15 million to improve the film's visual effects. On top of that, the studio freed the creators from any restrictions and granted them full creative control over the film. Later, this decision drew criticism from Michael J. White. According to him, the first third of the film was supposed to be more grounded and dramatic, but after New Line Cinema gave the creators more creative freedom and pushed for more special effects, many scenes had to be reshot. According to White, he didn't like that because the production became chaotic, and he often had no idea what they were shooting or how it even ended up in the script. Michael J. White is often credited with praising the film, but the actor himself frequently emphasizes in interviews that he didn't like Spawn and never called it a good movie. When the studio finally received a full rough cut of the film, the excitement among the executives had faded. When Spawn came back from its date with the ratings board carrying an R rating, the filmmakers were ordered to cut the film down to achieve a PG-13, which they did. A director's cut with the original R rating was later released on home video. Spawn started off very well at the box office. In its first week at the US box office, it grossed $21 million, and in terms of per-screen average, it was just slightly behind Air Force One among the top 20 releases. Because of this, the film even got more screens in its second week. However, instead of holding steady, it quickly collapsed. As a result, 2 weeks later, with some of the weakest numbers in the top 10, the film lost half its screens. Spawn immediately dropped out of the top 10 and quickly sank. The film grossed $87 million worldwide on a $40 million budget. While that can't really be called a success, the film still could have gotten a sequel if not for the poor reviews from critics and audiences. In the US, Spawn has a rating around 5.2, which is a very poor result. The studio had plans for 2 follow-ups, which were supposed to hit theaters in 1998 and 1999. According to rumors, the studio's executives were deeply disappointed by the fact that, after granting the creators full creative control and nearly doubling the original budget, the final result turned out the way it did. For a long time, there was a lot of talk in the news about a Spawn reboot, with Jamie Foxx in the lead role. Filming was initially planned for 2018, then pushed to 2019, but then everything went quiet. The film is officially alive and is expected to be released in 2025. Unlike Spawn, which had a relatively smooth production, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen was a different story. Stephen Norrington agreed to direct the film, even turning down a sequel to Blade for the opportunity. Later, he deeply regretted that decision. According to him, working on The League was the worst experience of his life. Not only were the producers and studio breathing down his neck and watching his every move on set, Sean Connery also constantly tried to teach him how to do his job. Connery was one of those actors who remained a superstar even in his 70s. He was paid $17 million for his role in The League, and was the only person on set whose words the studio always took into account. The actor later admitted that he didn't want to be in the film. He didn't understand the script and thought it was complete nonsense. But in the late 1990s and early 2000s, he had turned down several major projects that later became massive hits. Many of them, including The Matrix, he turned down precisely because he thought their scripts made no sense. So when he came across yet another weird project, he decided to take a chance, as he didn't understand modern cinema and could no longer pick scripts the way he used to. While Connery was willing to turn a blind eye to the script, he made no such exception for the director. According to all the actors and crew members, Connery would snap at anyone he thought wasn't doing their job properly, and the director got the worst of it. According to Jason Fleming, one of the film's actors, the shoot was often interrupted by Sir Sean's shouting. His voice was so commanding that even when he was yelling at the director, the rest of the cast couldn't help but look down like misbehaving kids. At the same time, Stephen Norrington kept stubbornly arguing with the actor over every little thing, forcing Sean Connery to resort to curses many of the cast members had never even heard of before. Later, Norrington refused to participate in any promotional activities and announced he was leaving the film industry. At one of the premiere screenings, when journalists asked Sean Connery about the director's whereabouts, he recommended them to check the local asylum. To make matters worse, the film suffered from one of the worst floods in Czech history, which destroyed nearly $10 million worth of sets. The studio was understandably shocked, and after poor test screenings, they heavily cut down the film. They removed nearly 40 minutes of footage, and the version that hit theaters ended up running just 1 hour and 50 minutes. The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen was also released at a highly unfortunate time. It opened on the same day as the first Pirates of the Caribbean. When it became obvious that Gore Verbinski's film was one of the biggest hits of 2003, it was too late to change anything. As a result, in most countries, The League was released either right before or right after Pirates of the Caribbean, leaving it with no real chance of success. As if that weren't enough, the film was also relentlessly attacked by critics, who completely tore it apart. Although American audiences responded slightly better than they did to Spawn, the film's average score of around 6 is hard to call a good result. The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen grossed $179 million worldwide on a $78 million budget, which technically made a sequel possible. While marketing expenses probably left the studio in the red, home video and TV sales likely compensated for the loss. Many attribute the studio's refusal to make a sequel to the film's poor reception by critics and audiences. But for some reason, no one mentions Sean Connery, who retired from acting after The League hit the big screen, saying he no longer understood Hollywood, and that it was time for him to leave. Perhaps that moment had a far greater impact on the possibility of a sequel than anything else. While the ending technically allowed the story to continue without him, it also suggested that Sean might come back if everything aligned perfectly. Besides, trying to launch a sequel to a controversial film without its main star would have been a crazy decision. Director Stephen Norrington, who had left the film industry, later seemed to reconsider, and his name often came up in connection with various stalled projects such as The Crow and Akira. But he eventually dropped out of those projects, and so far, his return to filmmaking hasn't happened. But the director's only 60 years old, and he could easily resume his career if he wanted to. Jonah Hex is one of those questionable films that nobody really cared about by the time it came out, not even the studio behind it. Yet, when the project first entered production, things didn't look so bad. Even Matthew McConaughey showed interest in the film, but he couldn't come to an agreement with the studio over his fee. Later, Mark Neveldine, whose career had taken off after the success of Crank High Voltage, joined the project. However, he eventually dropped out due to creative differences with the studio. After that, the script was rewritten several times and Josh Brolin was brought on board. Brolin, however, insisted on even more rewrites, saying the script was terribly bad. After the script was reworked for Josh Brolin, the filmmakers managed to cast Megan Fox, whose career was on the rise thanks to the success of Transformers. The director's chair went to Jimmy Hayward, known for the animated film Horton Hears a Who. When all these undeniably talented people presented Jonah Hex to a test audience, it turned out that the film was absolutely unfit for theatrical release. Warner Brothers quickly gathered all the actors and organized extensive reshoots. The filmmakers cut out entire storylines and added some new ones that director Jimmy Hayward came up with in a rush. They spent a month trying to fix the film, and in the process, most of it was changed, which increased the budget from $35 to $47 million. But even after all that, test audiences remained unimpressed, and the film was still unfit for public release. Once it became clear that Jonah Hex couldn't be saved, the studio released it with virtually no marketing support. Josh Brolin later said that while Jonah Hex was a terrible movie, the cast and the director did their best and poured their hearts into it. No one wanted it to turn out the way it did. Megan Fox even said that this was the worst movie she had ever appeared in. Jonah Hex was a complete box office flop. With a budget of $47 million, the film grossed only $10 million in the US. Just a week after its release, it had the worst per-screen average among the 50 films playing in American theaters at the time. In many countries, the movie was quickly pulled from the studio's release schedule and went straight to home video. A bit later, Jonah Hex also received 2 Golden Raspberry nominations. There could have been more, but nobody really cared about the film, so the only ones who got recognized were Josh Brolin and Megan Fox. The Hellboy reboot also had a rough journey, just like the entire film series about the demon from hell. The first film, directed by Guillermo del Toro in 2004, was a box office flop. What saved it were the excellent reviews from critics and audiences and impressive home video sales, which convinced the studio to greenlight a sequel 4 years later. That film also struggled at the box office, though not as badly as the first one. Although the second film was also well received, its earnings from TV and home video sales apparently weren't great, as the third film never came to be. There are a lot of rumors about it that often contradict each other. Some say that Guillermo del Toro wanted $100 million for the third film and wouldn't agree to a lower budget. Others suggest that Hellboy creator and producer Mike Mignola wanted to take the franchise in a different direction and have more creative control, which del Toro naturally wouldn't accept. In the end, in 2019, we got a $50 million reboot with a new cast, Neil Marshall directing, and Mignola overseeing creative decisions. Plus, the film received an R rating, while the first movies were rated PG-13. David Harbour, who played the lead role in the reboot, believes that the main reason for the film's massive failure was the fans of Guillermo del Toro's version. According to him, there were just too many of them, and from the very beginning, the reboot was surrounded by negative buzz that had nothing to do with the film's quality. Over time, that negativity only grew stronger, eventually scaring off regular moviegoers who might have liked the film. The movie hit theaters in April 2019 and completely flopped at the box office. With a budget of $50 million, it grossed only $55 million. And although the audience ratings weren't as bad as those of Jonah Hex, the film still received 5 Golden Raspberry nominations. The new Dredd, unlike Judge Dredd with Sylvester Stallone, was created with the original comics fanbase in mind, who had strongly rejected the 1995 adaptation. Judging by critics and audience scores, the filmmakers succeeded in winning them over. However, the production process was far from smooth. Pete Travis, known for Vantage Point, is officially credited as the film's director. The screenplay was written by Alex Garland, who had previously worked on Sunshine, The Beach, and 28 Days Later. But, according to Carl Urban, who played Dredd, it was Garland who primarily oversaw the shoot, while Travis mostly handled pre-production work and filmed things like sunrises. The creators tried to distance themselves from the film with Sly, which they repeatedly emphasized, but they still couldn't completely remove Stallone's DNA from the new movie. As a result, even though he doesn't appear in the film, his presence is still felt. That's because Garland was involved with the project in its early stages of development, and it was thanks to him that Dredd was greenlit in the first place. On top of that, most of the film's producers were people Garland had already worked with on The Beach, 28 Weeks Later, and later on Ex Machina. Perhaps that's why Duncan Jones turned down the chance to direct the films, choosing source code instead. According to Jones, he liked the script, but he knew he probably wouldn't be able to work peacefully while Garland had full creative control. And while Pete Travis turned a blind eye to that, he did occasionally speak up on set, expressing his disagreement with Garland's decisions. In such cases, however, he was simply asked to sit aside and let the grown-ups work. As a result, Travis didn't participate in the editing process, and all post-production was handled by Alex Garland. Travis's departure was explained by creative differences. All these issues harmed the film, and its test screenings went poorly, forcing the studio to order reshoots. The reshoots were handled solely by Garland, which led many in Hollywood to believe that Pete Travis would ultimately be removed from the director's credit, leaving only Alex Garland's name. But the Directors Guild was convinced that the changes were minimal, and the film still officially belonged to Pete Travis, with everyone else handling minor shots like crumbling plaster. The film was a massive failure in the US. With a budget of $50 million, Dredd grossed only $13 million at the box office. Just 1 week after its release, Dredd fell out of the top 10 at the box office, and a week after that, it dropped to 31st place and quickly disappeared from the charts. Naturally, the studio immediately canceled 33 planned sequels, 2 spin-offs, and 4 prequels. The producer, meanwhile, pretended the movie never existed. The only one who keeps bringing it up is mostly Carl Urban, who has repeatedly claimed that the sequel is just about to enter production and that progress has finally been made. After that, of course, the film is supposed to turn into the greatest TV series ever, which everyone already seems to agree to make. But none of that talk has ever led anywhere. Still, the film has its fan base, and it's actually not that small, so there's a chance that one day a movie or a series will eventually come out. But if a few more years pass, the world will most likely just get yet another reboot. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned.